LMGs are overpowered in Warzone 2, and it's hard to tell which one is the best, but after looking into and testing out all the light machine guns, it's clear that it comes down to the RAAL MG versus the Sakin MG38. To help you decide which weapon is the best for you, I'm going to be comparing their stats and giving you my opinion on which is the best after my extensive gameplay with both. Then I'll give you the best class setups for each LMG. Make sure to watch through all the stats because you never know which one might be the deciding factor for you. I'm going to start off with the big time stats that you care about the most: fire rate, time to kill, and recoil. For the fire rates, we're going to have 652 rounds per minute for the Sakin versus 556 for the RAAL. This is a nice little advantage for the Sakin because it makes the weapon way more forgiving, because if you miss a shot, the time to kill is affected less when you miss. The Sakin only adds 92 milliseconds to its TTK per missed shot, whereas the RAAL will add 108 milliseconds. That means the Sakin is 16 milliseconds more forgiving, which can start to add up quickly with each missed bullet. If we move over to the time to kill against full health players at 250 health, the RAAL will be better at every range with 432 milliseconds at close range compared to 552 for the Sakin. These are both incredible time to kills up close. The RAAL kills nearly 100 milliseconds faster than the Lockman sub up close, which is the fastest TTK SMG. That's honestly wild. And next, the Sakin has a mid and long range time to kill, where the RAAL only has one time to kill drop off. At mid-range, the Sakin has a 644 millisecond TTK, which is equivalent to the Minibac's close range time to kill. Then for long-range TTKs, the RAAL knocks in 540 milliseconds and the Sakin in 736. These are both stupid, but the RAAL is on another level, with its TTK being equivalent to the Vastev up close, at unlimited ranges. But both weapons will have an open bolt delay, and if you're wondering what that is, it's a delay from when you pull the trigger to your gun actually firing. So in essence, you should just be adding it on top of the TTK, because most of the time you aren't going to be pre-firing. The Sakin has a 22 millisecond delay, which is very small, but the RAAL has a 72 millisecond delay that is very noticeable while you're using it. And so far, we have the Sakin being more forgiving and having a smaller open bolt delay, and the RAAL having a much better time to kill. And quickly jumping into the ranges before we go to the firing range, we're going to have 42 meters for the RAAL and 36 and 61 meters for the Sakin's 2 TTK drop-offs. The RAAL just has insane damage output that is out of this world in comparison to any other weapon in Warzone 2. But this advantage will do you no good if the recoil is terrible, so let's head on over to the firing range to compare their recoil patterns. As you can see, they both have some vertical and horizontal recoil, but the RAAL is more vertical, with the Sakin being a bit more horizontal. When looking at the patterns, it's easy to see that the RAAL has a bigger magnitude of recoil than the Sakin. That is very condensed, meaning you have to make less adjustments to control that recoil. And while normally vertical recoil is much easier to control, in this instance, the Sakin is easily more accurate, but I don't find it difficult to control either weapon, and it should be easy enough for any of you to hit your shots. For clarity, I would say I miss fewer shots with the Sakin than the RAAL, although in my stats I have identical 23.08% headshot percentage, which is on the higher end for my long-range weapons that aren't snipers, so take what you want from that knowledge. Now I'm going to transition to the stats that you may not find to be as sexy, but truly impact how the weapon performs and could make the difference in which weapon you prefer to use. I will start with the average damage at close and long range, where the RAAL will be better with 48 to 37.8 and 44.2 to 29.8. That results in way fewer shots to knock, which is why the time to kill is much faster, even though its fire rate is about 100 rounds per minute slower. We're talking about 2 less bullets to kill with the RAAL. Needing to hit fewer shots can sometimes mean it's easier to use and take less skill with fully automatic weapons, because you don't need to control the recoil for as long. Another category that plays a big part on weapons and is a light machine gun strong suit is damage per mag, where even though the Sakin has 100 rounds to the RAAL's 75, it will still lose the long-range damage per mag by a good margin at 3450 to 2900. This makes almost no difference because both are plenty for any mode. In quads, a full team has 1000 health, and if you want to add capping them on top of it, they'll be at 1400 health. And you should be able to complete the whole fight without reloading whether you win or not. The RAAL can theoretically knock 13.8 players before reloading, and to knock a team of 4 before reloading, you would need to only hit 29% of your shots. And at mid-range, that should be easily possible, and that's if you don't have any help from your teammates. Let's take a look at long-range damage per second, where the RAAL will be better because it just outputs damage at an insane rate, 426 to 315. The DPS pretty much just equates to time to kill. Whichever weapon has the faster damage per second will generally have the faster time to kill, and with that being said, long-range fights also come down to accuracy, where the Sakin is better. But what about the mobility that still plays a factor in these long-range fights? With these stats being somewhat similar, but the Sakin will still have the advantage here with a better aim down sight speed, better ADS movement, sprint speed, speed and reload time. You will certainly notice the ADS and sprint speed differences while playing with these two weapons, and since the Sakin has a smaller magnitude of recoil, you can help the movement a bit more with its build. The Sakin won't be flying around, but it won't feel like you're stuck in mud like you kind of do with the RAAL. And the last stat I want to go over quickly is going to be bullet velocity, which is very important on our long-range weapons, and the RAAL is going to be slightly better. It's 730 meters per second to 700 on the base weapons. This is certainly a small benefit to the RAAL at long range, making it a little bit easier to hit your shots on moving targets. This is also a nice benefit to both weapons over assault rifles like the ISO Hemlock or TAC-56, where their base bullet velocities are 590 meters per second. This only starts to become a factor at about 50 meters, but you will have an easier time with these LMGs because of the higher bullet velocity. And I put a lot of effort into making these videos for you guys, so please make sure to hit the like button if this video has been helpful, and subscribe for more Warzone 2 content to help ascend your gameplay. Now for my verdict on which weapon is better. The RAAL. It just has too much firepower to compete with, even with its painfully slow mobility that I hate. When I look at my stats after using both weapons, my KD is twice as good with the RAAL to the Sakin. I have about 50 kills with each weapon, and my RAAL KD is 10 with my Sakin being at 5. The time to kill is just too ridiculously fast right now, but I would be a fool to not see and tell you guys how good the Sakin is. The better mobility, better recoil, and better fire rate all make the Sakin more forgiving and player friendly, and I would recommend it to the average player over the RAAL because of that. But I'm expecting the RAAL to get a TTK nerf next week to 648 milliseconds, which is just adding 1 bullet to kill on it, which will make it much more in line with the other light machine guns. It would still be great, but not clearly the best anymore. I would definitely switch to the Sakin when that happens. And let's jump straight into the class setups for the 2 best LMGs in Warzone. Alright, so we're going to start with this RAAL, and we're going to use this BVM338 muzzle, which helps with horizontal and vertical recoil. And we can use this over suppressor because we don't need the extra bullet velocity because the base bullet velocity is so high. And for the tuning, I'm going to go towards recoil stabilization at plus 0.31 and towards gun kick at plus 0.25. Because this thing does have quite the magnitude of recoil, we're trying to tone that down a bit with this amazing muzzle. Then I use the Rhino barrel, which will actually help our bullet velocity as well as our recoil control. It does hurt the movement and ADS speed a bit, but that's why we got that FSSO V laser on the side. And for the tuning on this barrel, we're going to go towards recoil steadiness at plus 0.37 and towards damage range at plus 0.18. Because you understand that we actually have like a 430 millisecond TTK out to 42 meters, we might as well make that go out a little bit farther. You're still going to be using this RAAL at 25, 30, 40 meters, and that just busted. And I don't tune this FSSO V laser, and the reason I use it is because it helps our ADS speed and aiming stability. The sprint to fire speed isn't really a big deal because you're almost never going to be running around with this weapon. And then of course we use high velocity for the increased bullet velocity. On this build, we're going to have about 1200 meters per second, which makes the gun feel quite amazing at 75 meters. And for the tuning on this, I go towards damage range again because we want that 430 millisecond TTK to go out as far as possible. And then I also do not touch the bottom because I don't want to hurt the recoil steadiness, and our bullet velocity is already good enough. And finally, use the aim up. I don't tune it, but if you find the visual recoil to be too much, just push your eye position to far and it will make it a lot easier to aim. Now we're going to go over to the Sakin class setup, and we're going to start off with the Sakin tread muzzle, which is very fitting to use on this weapon. Now, even though this weapon has more horizontal recoil, I found this barrel to be better than the bore, even though it helps more with our vertical recoil than horizontal. I mean, you can try out both yourself, but I personally found it easier to aim with the Sakin tread. Then for the tuning, I go towards recoil stabilization at plus 0.57 and towards gun kick control at plus 0.24. Then from here, we use high velocity like we did before. I push it towards damage range, and this one I push towards bullet velocity because I don't have that barrel on there. So instead of being at about 1010, we'll hike it up to about 1030 by going to plus 6.1, and then towards damage range at plus 0.5. And then on this one, I got the FSSO V laser once again, but I actually tune it on this weapon because the aiming idle stability isn't as important with this one because the recoil isn't as bad. So I go towards ADS at negative 26.32 and towards aim walking steadiness at plus 0.29 because we don't care about sprint to fire on our LMGs. And on this build compared to my RAAL build, the ADS speed is going to be about 100 milliseconds better, and it's very noticeable and it feels much better. So I skipped the underbarrel, which I usually use a lock grip on because it hurts our ADS by 40 milliseconds. But I use this Bruin rear grip that gives us recoil control, and it's only 2% less than the lock grip, but we get 40 milliseconds better on our aim down sight speed, and it makes the weapon just feel so much nicer when you're using it. So then for the tuning, I go towards recoil steadiness at plus 0.71, and then I go all the way towards aiming idle stability at plus 0.41. And I do that because this actually hurts our aiming idle stability, so I'm trying to make that con a little bit less. And then once again, I use the aim op, and like I said before, if the visual recoil is too much for you, you can just push the eye position to far, but I don't find it to be necessary. Both of these LMGs are super OP, and you're not going to go wrong using either one. And if you want to know what weapons to pair with these, I have the top 5 close range weapons linked right here, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.